In a world that constantly separates the spiritual from the physical, many people assume that being chosen by God is something that only happens internally, quietly, invisibly, as if the body were merely a bystander to a divine calling. But the truth is far deeper and far more tangible than most realize. Because when God calls, the call does not stop at the soul, it moves through the mind and settles into the body itself, leaving behind sensations, changes, and signals that cannot be ignored. The body is not separate from the awakening. It is part of the confirmation, a living witness that something eternal has already begun. For those who are chosen, the body becomes sensitive, responsive, and alert in ways that feel unfamiliar. At first, sometimes confusing, sometimes overwhelming, yet always purposeful. These reactions are not random, not imagined, and not meaningless. They are signs of alignment, indicators that preparation is underway, evidence that heaven is working deeper than conscious thought. If you have felt unusual fatigue, strange heaviness, insensitivity, or changes that cannot be explained by routine or circumstance, this is not coincidence, it is communication. The awakening does not announce itself with noise, it reveals itself through transformation, and often the body is the first to speak. This is why the purpose of this message is not to create fear or mystery, but clarity to help you understand 7 unmistakable physical changes that appear in the lives of those who are truly chosen, not as symptoms of weakness, but as markers of a real spiritual awakening already in motion. And as we move into the first of these signs, it becomes clear that one of the most misunderstood experiences of the chosen is the deep, unexplainable fatigue that arrives not to drain you, but to refine you. This exhaustion does not behave like ordinary tiredness because it does not respond fully to sleep, rest, or changes in routine, and it often appears even when life seems calm, manageable, and outwardly stable, leaving you wondering why your body feels heavy when your circumstances are not. This kind of fatigue is different because it is not produced by effort alone. It is produced by process, by the unseen work happening beneath awareness, where spiritual alignment begins to reshape inner structures. Before the mind understands what is happening, the body feels it carrying weight that does not belong to muscles or bones, but to preparation itself. Many chosen ones describe this fatigue as a pressure rather than a weakness, a sense of being pulled inward, slowed down, grounded, as if life is asking them to pause without explanation. This happens because the body is responding to invisible spiritual battles, internal realignments and emotional purifications that have not yet reached conscious understanding. Just as a building must be reinforced from the inside before it can carry more weight, the body begins adjusting before the calling fully manifests. This exhaustion is not a signal that you are failing, it is a sign that you are being fortified, that inner resistance is being removed, that old patterns, unresolved pain, and subconscious burdens are being brought to the surface to be released. The reason it feels heavy is because refinement is not gentle, it is precise, intentional, and thorough. Gold does not become pure by avoiding heat, it becomes pure by passing through it. And in the same way, this fatigue is evidence that something in you is being purified, stripped of what no longer aligns, strengthened for what is coming. Many people misinterpret this stage and attempt to fight it with stimulation, distraction, or constant activity, believing that pushing harder will restore what feels lost. But this only deepens the exhaustion because the body is not asking for escape, it is asking for attention. This is not the tiredness of laziness or burnout. It is the tiredness of transition, the fatigue of a soul shedding old layers while learning to carry new weight. When heaven begins to shape someone for a specific purpose, energy is redirected inward away from excess noise and outward, striving toward inner stabilization and clarity. That is why even simple tasks can feel heavier, why motivation fluctuates, why rest does not always feel restorative, because the restoration required is not physical alone, it is spiritual alignment. This fatigue is often accompanied by moments of emotional surfacing, memories rising unexpectedly, sensitivity to noise, crowds, or conflict because the body is no longer operating in survival mode. It is recalibrating. What once was tolerated now feels draining. What once was ignored now feels heavy. And this is not regression, it is refinement. The chosen are not being weakened, they are being narrowed, focused, and purified, and this requires energy. The body, sensing the magnitude of what is being prepared, slows the system down so that nothing fractures under the weight of acceleration. This is why listening becomes more important than pushing during this stage. When you stop fighting the fatigue and begin observing it, you start to notice patterns that it intensifies during moments of inner change, spiritual reflection, or emotional honesty, and softens when you allow yourself stillness, prayer, or surrender. This is because the body recognizes alignment before the mind does, and it responds positively when resistance decreases. The exhaustion begins to communicate instead of dominate, revealing where growth is happening, where release is required, where rest is not about sleep but about trust. Many chosen ones feel guilt during this phase, believing they should be doing more, moving faster, producing visible results. But this phase is not about output, it is about capacity. Heaven is not preparing you to move quickly, it is preparing you to endure, to carry weight without collapsing, to stand steady when momentum returns. The fatigue is temporary, but the refinement it produces is permanent. Those who learn to honor this stage emerge with clarity, resilience, and discernment that cannot be taught through activity alone. This is the season where the body teaches the soul patience, where silence becomes productive, where slowing down becomes strategic, and where exhaustion reveals not weakness but worth. If you're experiencing this deep, unexplainable fatigue, do not rush to label it as failure or loss, because it may be the clearest sign that something sacred is being shaped within you, that the fire is doing its work, and that your calling is being prepared to shine with a strength that cannot be rushed and does not need to be proven. As the journey continues beyond the exhaustion of refinement, the awakening does not remain silent for long, because once the inner structures begin to align, the presence that initiated the process starts to make itself felt in more tangible ways. And this is where many chosen ones begin to experience physical sensations that appear specifically during moments of prayer, worship, or sincere spiritual reflection. These sensations are often the point where doubt tries to intervene, because the mind searches for rational explanations, while the body responds to something it recognizes instinctively. Chills running along the spine, waves of warmth moving through the hands or chest, sudden shivers without cold, a gentle but unmistakable pressure over the heart, or tears rising without emotional distress are not random bodily glitches, nor are they products of imagination or suggestion. They are the body's response to alignment, the physical echo of the soul coming into agreement with heaven. When surrender becomes genuine and resistance softens, the body reacts because it is no longer operating as a closed system, it becomes receptive. The body was never meant to be disconnected from the spiritual realm. It was designed as a vessel, a living instrument that responds when divine presence draws near. These sensations often appear without effort, without music, without ritual, sometimes in silence, sometimes in the most ordinary moments, because God's touch does not depend on atmosphere, it responds to openness. The chosen often report that their hands feel warm or heavy during prayer, not as discomfort but as activation, as if energy is being directed outward, preparing them to give, to intercede, to heal, or to carry responsibility beyond themselves. Others feel a tightening or fullness in the chest, not panic but pressure, as though something is being awakened at the core, expanding capacity, strengthening compassion, anchoring purpose. Sudden tears are another common experience, and they do not come from sadness but from release, because when alignment happens, the soul lets go of burdens it has carried quietly for years, and the body releases what the mind could not articulate. This is not emotional overflow, it is spiritual agreement expressing itself physically. Many doubt these moments because they are subtle yet powerful, but subtlety is often the signature of truth, And the more consistent these sensations become, the clearer it is that something real is happening beneath conscious control. The body responds because the soul has yielded, and when the soul yields, heaven draws near without force. No external ritual is required, because presence does not need permission when the heart is willing. This is why chosen ones often feel these sensations alone in quiet rooms during reflection or in simple prayer, because God meets authenticity, not performance. As this awareness deepens, it naturally leads into a heightened sensitivity to environments, emotions, and spiritual atmospheres, because once the body learns to respond to presence, it also learns to detect absence, distortion, and weight. This sensitivity can feel overwhelming at first because the chosen begin to notice that certain places drain them, certain conversations leave them heavy, and certain people carry emotions that register physically before words are spoken. Tightness in the chest, pressure in the head, discomfort in the stomach, sudden fatigue or waves of sadness that do not belong to personal circumstances often arise when the body absorbs what the environment carries. This is not weakness, it is perception. The chosen do not merely observe the world, they feel it, because their bodies have been trained to register what others bypass. Emotional and spiritual atmospheres are real, and some are heavier than others, and when someone is set apart to perceive and respond, their body becomes the first point of contact. This is why crowded places can feel exhausting, why intense conversations linger physically, why certain environments feel oppressive without obvious cause. The body is not malfunctioning, it is translating information the conscious mind has not yet processed. This sensitivity is often misunderstood and mislabeled as anxiety, stress, or emotional instability, but its true function is discernment. It allows the chosen to recognize pain before it is spoken, confusion before it escalates, and heaviness before it manifests outwardly. This gift is not given to overwhelm, but to guide, and it becomes manageable when understood. One of the clearest confirmations that this sensitivity is spiritual rather than physical is how quickly symptoms dissolve when the environment changes or prayer is applied. Leaving a space, stepping into quiet worship or intentional alignment often causes the discomfort to fade suddenly, sometimes within moments, revealing that the source was not internal imbalance but external influence. This teaches an important lesson. Not all pain belongs to you. Not all heaviness is yours to carry, and not every sensation requires panic or diagnosis. The body is alerting you, not attacking you. Protection during this phase is essential, not through avoidance of life, but through awareness and intentional grounding. Prayer before entering demanding environments, discernment in conversations, and permission to step away when peace is compromised are not signs of fragility, they are acts of wisdom. The chosen must learn to guard their energy without guilt, to recognize that sensitivity is a tool that requires boundaries. Denying it only amplifies the discomfort, but honoring it allows clarity to emerge. This heightened perception also explains why prayer becomes restorative, why solitude feels necessary, and why alignment brings relief. The body recalibrates when it is no longer absorbing indiscriminately. As this awareness matures, some chosen begin to notice physical markings or skin reactions that appear without clear medical explanation. And this is where fear often tries to take hold, but understanding transforms fear into insight. Sudden rashes, redness, itching, burning sensations, or unusual sensitivity that arises during periods of intense spiritual focus. Consecration, fasting, or inner transformation are not uncommon during deep activation. These reactions often appear briefly and disappear just as quickly, sometimes within hours or days, without treatment, leaving confusion but also curiosity. The skin, being the body's outer boundary, often reflects what is happening internally. And when spiritual activity intensifies, the body sometimes expresses it externally as a form of signaling rather than sickness. Throughout history, people set apart for spiritual roles have described similar manifestations, often referring to them as seals marks or confirmations, not because they are dramatic or permanent, but because they coincide with moments of alignment, calling, or transition. These markings are not punishments, nor are they signs of illness by default. They are responses, temporary indicators that something is shifting beneath the surface. The body acting as a messenger reflects the intensity of inner change. This does not mean that medical wisdom should be ignored when necessary, but it does mean that not every unexplained reaction needs to be feared. The chosen are called to respond with discernment, not panic, to observe patterns rather than fixate on symptoms. When these reactions appear during prayer reflection or spiritual dedication and fade when alignment stabilizes, it becomes clear that they are connected to process rather than pathology. Prayer during these moments often brings clarity, peace, and resolution, because prayer does not fight the body, it harmonizes it. Reflection replaces fear, understanding replaces confusion, and the body settles once the message has been received. These signs are not meant to alarm, they are meant to awaken awareness. They invite the chosen to slow down, to listen, to ask, what is being activated, released, or sealed? The most important thing to understand through all of these experiences is that the body is not betraying you, it is cooperating with the awakening. Every sensation, every reaction, every unusual response is part of a communication system designed to prepare, protect, and guide. The chosen are not marked by chaos, but by sensitivity. And sensitivity requires interpretation, not suppression. As awareness grows, fear dissolves, because what once felt overwhelming begins to make sense. The body becomes an ally rather than an obstacle, a guide rather than a mystery. When you stop resisting these signs and start listening to them, they lose their intensity and gain purpose. You begin to recognize when to rest, when to pray, when to withdraw, and when to engage. You learn that alignment brings relief, that surrender brings clarity, and that trust steadies the system. This is not about mysticism or exaggeration, it is about integration. The awakening is not confined to belief alone, it involves the whole being, spirit, soul, and body moving into coherence. If these experiences resonate with you, it is not because you are imagining things, it is because your system is responding to a calling that requires awareness beyond the surface. You're not losing control, you're gaining alignment. You're not becoming fragile, you are becoming precise. And as this process continues, the body will continue to speak, not to confuse you, but to confirm what your soul already knows, that you are being prepared for something greater. And that preparation involves every layer of who you are working together, responding together and awakening together in a way that cannot be rushed, forced, or denied. As the awakening deepens and the body becomes more attuned to spiritual movement, the rhythm of rest itself begins to change, not as punishment or disorder, but as part of a larger recalibration that often reveals itself through altered sleep patterns and nighttime activation moments when the world is quiet, but the inner life is alert. Many chosen ones notice that they begin waking consistently between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock a.m., often without alarm, without anxiety, and without the racing thoughts typical of insomnia. This awakening feels different, not chaotic or restless, but purposeful, as though something inside is calling attention rather than demanding escape. This hour, when the external world is still and distractions are minimal, becomes a threshold where spiritual awareness sharpens because the mind is less guarded and the soul more receptive. This is not the body failing to rest, it is the spirit being stirred. In this window, many feel an urge to pray, reflect, or simply sit in awareness, even if they do not yet understand why. The awakening itself becomes the message signaling that alignment is occurring at a level deeper than habit or routine. Sleep, once purely restorative, begins to transform into a training ground where the spirit remains active while the body rests, and this shift can feel disorienting at first because it challenges the idea that rest means total shutdown. For the chosen, rest becomes layered. The body sleeps, but the spirit listens. Alongside these awakenings come dreams that feel unusually vivid, intense, and emotionally charged dreams that linger after waking, carrying symbols, faces, places, or messages that refuse to fade. These are not the fragmented images of a restless mind, but experiences that feel lived rather than imagined, often accompanied by physical sensations like a racing heart warmth or lingering emotion. Some dreams bring clarity, others bring warning, and others simply confirm something already sensed during waking life. The common thread is their weight, their realism, and their persistence. The chosen often wake knowing that what they experienced mattered, even if interpretation comes later. This is because during sleep, the barriers between conscious control and spiritual perception soften, allowing insight to surface without resistance. Not every dream requires decoding, but their intensity alone signals activation. As this continues, many experience restlessness before sleep, a sense that the mind or body cannot fully settle until alignment occurs. This is not anxiety, it is readiness. Prayer before sleep often becomes the bridge that allows rest to arrive, because prayer does not force sleep, it invites peace. When the spirit is acknowledged, the body relaxes. Ignoring this restlessness only prolongs it, but honoring it through stillness, reflection, or surrender allows the system to reset. Night awakenings and vivid dreams are not disruptions, they are invitations, signs that the calling is no longer dormant and that communication is happening beyond daylight consciousness. The chosen are not losing rest, they are gaining awareness, learning to operate across dimensions of perception where even sleep becomes purposeful. As this integration strengthens, another confirmation begins to appear, one that often brings relief rather than confusion, the sudden disappearance of pain or discomfort after prayer or worship. Many chosen ones experience physical symptoms that arise without clear cause: tension in the back, tightness in the chest, heaviness in the shoulders, headaches or fatigue that feels disproportionate to activity. These sensations can be unsettling, especially when medical explanations fall short, but what reveals their true nature is how quickly they dissolve when sincere prayer, worship, or alignment enters the moment. A discomfort that lingered for hours can vanish within minutes, sometimes instantly, not through medication or physical intervention, but through presence. This is not coincidence, it is confirmation. It reveals that the pain was not rooted in the body itself, but in the spiritual atmosphere surrounding it. Worship acts as a spiritual weapon, not because it distracts, but because it shifts environments. When alignment enters a space, heaviness cannot remain. Light does not negotiate with darkness, it replaces it. The body, already sensitive to spiritual movement, responds immediately when the atmosphere changes. This teaches an important discipline. When unexplained symptoms arise, panic is not the first response awareness is. Instead of immediately assuming something is wrong, the chosen learn to pause, to pray, to listen. If the discomfort fades, clarity follows. The body begins to learn the language of alignment, recognizing what comes from within and what arrives from without. This process trains discernment, not fear. It teaches the chosen to differentiate between physical needs and spiritual signals, and in doing so it strengthens confidence rather than dependence. Worship becomes a refuge, not because it numbs pain, but because it restores order. It recenters the system, reminding the body who leads. Over time, the body begins to obey the spirit more readily, releasing tension when alignment is restored, responding to peace faster, and recovering more efficiently. This obedience is not forced, it is learned through repetition and trust. Each time pain dissolves through prayer, the body gains evidence that it is safe to follow the Spirit's lead. This does not mean the chosen ignore physical health or wisdom, but it does mean they recognize that not every sensation is a threat. Many discover that the body had been carrying burdens. It was never meant to hold absorbing atmospheres, emotions and pressures silently until worship gives it permission to release. This is why symptoms often disappear completely rather than gradually, because the source is removed, not managed. As this awareness grows, fear loses its grip because understanding replaces uncertainty. The chosen stop bracing against their bodies and start partnering with them. They learn that alignment brings relief, that surrender restores balance, and that prayer is not an emergency measure, but a daily calibration. Through altered sleep, vivid dreams, sudden relief from pain, and heightened responsiveness, the body becomes a willing participant in the awakening rather than a confused bystander. It learns to rest when the spirit leads to release, when alignment returns, and to signal when attention is needed. This is not disorder, it is education. Heaven is teaching the body how to respond to spiritual reality, how to recognize presence, and how to remain steady under pressure. For those experiencing these signs, the message is not to fear the changes, but to understand them. The awakening does not tear you apart, it brings you together. Spirit, soul, and body begin to move in agreement, learning each other's language, responding to the same source. Sleep becomes sacred, pain becomes informative, worship becomes restorative, and awareness becomes protective. If these experiences are unfolding in your life, they are not happening by chance. They are part of a coherent process, a refinement that reaches every layer of your being, preparing you not only to believe differently, but to live differently, with a body that listens, a spirit that leads, and a soul that understands that it is being trained for something greater than comfort alone. As the awakening reaches its most mature phase, everything that once felt fragmented begins to converge, because true spiritual activation was never meant to elevate belief alone. It was designed to transform the entire being, spirit, soul, and body moving into a single coherent alignment. This is the moment when many finally realize that awakening is not an idea to accept, it is a state to embody. Long before the mind can name the calling, the body has already been responding, adjusting posture, energy, rhythm, and sensitivity to accommodate something larger than logic. The body carries signs before understanding arrives, because the body does not negotiate with ego, it responds to truth. While the mind asks questions, the body adapts. While doubt debates, the body listens. This is why many chosen ones experience physical shifts before they can explain what is happening to them, because the calling does not wait for permission from intellect, it moves through resonance. The heightened sensitivity that accompanies this stage is not an imbalance, it is calibration. You have not become fragile, you have become precise. Just as finely tuned instruments detect frequencies others cannot hear, your system has been adjusted to perceive layers of reality that once went unnoticed. This sensitivity affects how you feel environments, people, costumes, and even silence, because your internal compass has been recalibrated to respond to authenticity rather than appearance. It is common at this stage to feel misunderstood, because those who have not undergone this integration often interpret it through outdated frameworks, labeling it emotional, exaggerated, or impractical. But confusion from others does not invalidate your experience, it confirms that you're operating from a different orientation. The chosen are rarely understood while they are becoming, because transformation disrupts familiar categories. What matters is not external validation, but internal coherence. As spirit, soul, and body begin to move together, a sense of grounded clarity replaces confusion. The constant questioning softens not because answers arrive all at once, but because alignment creates stability. The body no longer feels like an obstacle, the emotions no longer feel like enemies, and the spirit no longer feels distant. Everything begins to work together. Physical changes that once felt alarming now feel informative. Sensations that once caused anxiety now serve as guidance. Fatigue becomes a signal to rest or realign. Sensitivity becomes a tool for discernment. Dreams become communication rather than noise. Pain becomes a message rather than a threat. This is what full activation looks like, not perfection, but integration. The body confirms what the soul already knows, and the mind gradually learns to trust both. You're no longer pulled apart by conflicting signals, you're brought together by understanding. This stage requires courage because it asks you to honor your experience even when it does not match conventional expectations. It asks you to stop explaining yourself and start listening to yourself. It invites you to recognize that your system has been trained differently, not to suffer more, but to perceive more, to respond more accurately, to carry responsibility with awareness rather than force. Integration does not make life easier, but it makes it clearer. You begin to know when to act and when to wait, when to engage and when to withdraw, when to speak and when to remain silent. This clarity does not come from rules, it comes from alignment. And alignment brings authority without aggression, confidence without arrogance, and strength without hardness. As this integration stabilizes, you may notice that the physical signs do not disappear entirely, but they become less chaotic. They no longer demand attention through intensity, they communicate through subtlety. The body no longer needs to shout because you are listening. The awakening has moved from disruption to cooperation. This is the evidence of maturity. You are not chasing signs anymore, you are living the alignment that produced them. And this brings us to the truth that must be spoken clearly and without hesitation. These physical changes are not random, they are not imagined, and they are not symptoms of dysfunction. They are confirmations of selection. They are the body's way of saying yes before the mind catches up. They are evidence that the activation has reached every layer of your being. You're not partially awakened, you're being chosen completely. The fatigue you felt was not collapse, it was construction. The sensations you experienced were not confusion, they were communication. The dreams were not fantasy, they were instruction. The pains were not punishment, they were perception. The sensitivity was not weakness, it was refinement. And when you see them together, not as isolated events, but as a unified pattern, the story becomes clear. Heaven has been training you in silence. You have been prepared without spectacle. You have been shaped from the inside out. This is why the invitation now is not to analyze further, but to honor what has already occurred. Stop questioning whether your experience is real and start asking how you are meant to steward it. Stop doubting your body and start listening to it. Stop minimizing what you feel and start respecting it. The awakening is not asking you to become someone else, it is asking you to inhabit yourself fully. Take a moment to reflect not on what you think should be happening, but on what has already been happening. What has your body been trying to tell you? Where has it been guiding you? What patterns have repeated themselves? What sensations return during alignment and disappear during surrender? These are not accidents, they are language. And learning this language is part of your calling. The final step is not mastery, it is agreement. Saying yes to the process does not mean you have all the answers, it means you trust the direction. It means you stop resisting the changes and start cooperating with them. It means you allow your life to rearrange itself around alignment rather than expectation. If this message resonates, it is not because you are curious, it is because you recognize yourself in it. You were not drawn here randomly. You're being reminded of what you already knew but needed confirmed. So say yes, not loudly, not performatively, but sincerely. Share this message with those who are quietly questioning their own experiences. Subscribe and continue the journey, not for information but for confirmation and clarity. The awakening does not end here, it stabilizes here. You are not becoming chosen, you already are. You're simply learning to live as someone who knows it in spirit, in soul and in body, fully aligned, fully activated and fully prepared for what comes next.